Human beings did not worship gods only because they loved them. Very often, they worshiped gods because they were afraid. Before temples, scriptures, kings, and priests, humanity lived beneath a sky it could not control. Thunder shook the earth, lightning split trees, rivers flooded, drought killed crops, disease moved invisibly from body to body, predators waited in the dark, the sea swallowed boats, the earth trembled, the sun disappeared during eclipses, and death waited at the end of every life. To ancient people, the world did not feel safe. It felt alive. More than that, it felt powerful. So humans did what they have always done when facing something too vast to understand. They gave it a name, gave it a face, and turned fear into a god. This may be one of the oldest origins of mythology. Not only love, gratitude, or philosophy, but fear. Fear of storms, hunger, death, darkness, infertility, disease, enemies, and the possibility that the world could collapse if invisible powers were angered. A storm was not just weather, it was divine rage. A plague was not just infection, it was punishment. A failed harvest was not only drought, it was a sign that something sacred had been neglected. A volcano was not geology, it was the mouth of a god. The ocean was not simply water, it was a living force that had to be respected, praised, fed, and feared. Humanity worshipped fear because fear was the first language through which the universe seemed to speak. Thunder sounded like a voice, lightning looked like a weapon, the rising sea felt like hunger. Mythology was born when humans looked at terror and decided it must mean something. And once fear had meaning, it could be negotiated with. A meaningless disaster is almost unbearable. If disease kills for no reason, if lightning strikes randomly, if children die for nothing, then the universe becomes terrifying because it is indifferent. But if disaster comes from gods, spirits, curses, omens, or broken rituals, then at least there is a relationship. A cruel god can be appeased. A silent universe cannot. So humans worshipped what they feared because worship created the possibility of control. A sacrifice might calm the storm. A prayer might soften a god. A ritual might protect the village. A taboo might prevent disaster. Even if fear remained, it was no longer shapeless. It entered a story. That is why many ancient gods were terrifying. They were not gentle symbols of comfort. They were powers: storm gods, war gods, death gods, plague gods, sea gods, fire gods, fertility gods, and underworld gods. They could bless, but they could also destroy. They could feed a civilization or starve it. They could bring rain or flood the earth. In Mesopotamia, the gods were powerful and unpredictable. Humans served them not because they were always loving, but because they ruled the forces that made life possible. If the gods were neglected, chaos could return. Myths of divine floods revealed how vulnerable people felt. The world could be drowned if heaven turned against humanity. In Egypt, fear took the form of chaos. Egyptians feared the collapse of Maat, truth, balance, order, and cosmic harmony. Each day, Ra crossed the sky. Each night, he entered the underworld and fought Apophis, the serpent of darkness and uncreation. If Apophis triumphed, the sun would not return. Egyptian religion was not only worship, it was the maintenance of reality. Rituals mattered because the universe was fragile. Kingship mattered because the pharaoh was tied to cosmic balance. Morality mattered because a heart heavy with wrongdoing could fail judgment after death. Fear here was not just fear of punishment, it was fear that order itself could collapse. This is one of humanity's deepest anxieties. We fear not only pain, but disorder. When laws fail, families break, truth becomes unclear, and the world stops making sense. Ma'at was the answer to that fear, but to protect order, people first had to fear its opposite. In Greece, the gods were beautiful, immortal, and dangerous. Zeus could bring justice, but also destruction. Poseidon could calm the sea or shatter ships. Apollo could heal or send plague. Dionysus could bring ecstasy or madness. Divine power was not the same as moral perfection. The gods were not safe. This created one of Greek mythology's most important warnings: hubris, the arrogance of forgetting one's place before the gods. Hubris warned humans not to confuse skill with invincibility, beauty with divinity, knowledge with ultimate power, or success with immunity. In other words, fear taught humility. That is one reason humans worshipped fear. Fear showed people where the limits were. Do not anger the storm. Do not insult the dead. Do not break the oath. Do not challenge the god. Do not believe that because you are powerful today, you cannot fall tomorrow. Modern people often think of fear as weakness, but ancient cultures often saw fear as wisdom. To fear the gods was not cowardice. It was recognition that the world was larger than human ego. In the Hebrew Bible and later religious traditions, fear of God often means more than terror. It can mean awe, reverence, humility, and moral seriousness. This kind of fear does not only paralyze, it disciplines. It asks, what if your actions matter beyond what other humans can see? Many ancient societies used sacred fear to protect order. Oaths were sworn before gods. Kings ruled by divine mandate. Laws were tied to heaven. Taboos guarded boundaries around sex, death, food, blood, family, and sacred spaces. Fear made invisible rules feel real. But sacred fear had a dark side. Priests, kings, and rulers could claim to speak for the gods. They could turn fear into obedience, make questioning power seem like offending heaven, and make suffering appear deserved. Once fear becomes sacred, it can be used by those who control the sacred. Still, not all ancient fear was manipulation. Fear existed before institutions. It was already there in thunder, childbirth, disease, the sea, and the grave. Religion did not invent fear. It organized it. It gave fear rituals, names, songs, myths, offerings, and meanings. Sometimes that organization was oppressive. Sometimes it was healing. A funeral ritual does not remove death, but it helps grief survive death. A storm prayer does not stop every storm, but it gives the frightened a voice. A harvest festival does not guarantee crops, but it turns dependence into gratitude. Fear, when shaped by myth, becomes bearable. This is why gods of death mattered so deeply. Death is the fear behind all fears. Every storm, disease, famine, war, and monster ultimately frightens us because it points toward death. So humans created death gods, underworlds, judges of souls, ancestors, ghosts, and afterlife realms. Death without meaning is almost impossible to endure. A death god gives death a face. A river to the underworld gives death a path. A judge of the dead gives death a moral structure. Ancestor worship gives death continuity. Rebirth gives death rhythm. Heaven gives death hope. Hell gives death justice. Even a frightening underworld may be less terrifying than nothingness, because it says the dead are somewhere. War gods existed for the same reason. War was one of the most terrifying realities of ancient life. A village could be burned. A city could fall. Children could be enslaved. The enemy could arrive at dawn. So people worshipped gods of war, not always because they loved violence, but because they wanted violence to be directed, blessed, controlled, or survived. War gods also reveal that humans feared violence because they knew violence lived inside them. The war god lived on the battlefield, but also in rage, ambition, revenge, loyalty, and sacrifice. Plague gods and disease spirits revealed another fear, the invisible. Before medicine understood microbes, disease seemed like a curse or a god's breath. It moved unseen from one body to another. This fear remains modern. Viruses, radiation, contamination, surveillance, and data still frighten us because unseen threats feel strangely sacred. Ancient fear has not disappeared. It has changed language. We no longer say a plague god walks through the city. We say a virus spreads. We no longer say the storm god is angry. We say the climate is destabilizing. We no longer say the war god demands blood. We speak of ideology, nationalism, economics, and power, but emotionally, we are still facing forces larger than ourselves. Humans worshipped fear because fear is one of the strongest ways we recognize power. We do not fear what feels irrelevant. We fear what can change us, hurt us, expose us, judge us, or destroy us. Fear tells us where power lies. But fear can become many things. It can make people humble or cruel. careful or violent, wise or panicked. It can create rituals of beauty or sacrifices of blood. Fear is powerful enough to build temples, but also powerful enough to burn people inside them. Every civilization had to decide what to do with fear. Some turned it into law, some into sacrifice, some into art, some into tyranny, some into philosophy, some into prayer. The greatest traditions did not simply tell humans to be afraid. They taught humans how to fear wisely. To fear death wisely is to value life. To fear chaos wisely is to protect balance. To fear the gods wisely is to practice humility. To fear wrongdoing wisely is to develop conscience. To fear nature wisely is to live with respect. But to fear blindly is to become a slave. This is the tension at the heart of sacred fear. Fear can awaken the soul or imprison it. It can open the eyes or close the mind. It can teach responsibility or destroy freedom. The purpose of fear is not to stop life. It is to deepen it. When humans worshipped fear, they were not always worshipping terror itself. Often, they were worshipping the power behind terror, the storm that destroys but also brings rain, the ocean that kills but also feeds, the fire that burns but also warms, the death that ends life but gives life urgency, the darkness that frightens but also holds dreams, ancestors, and mystery. Fear revealed that the world was not ours. Modern humanity often wants a world without fear, fully controlled, fully explained, fully safe, fully lit, but such a world may be impossible. And even if it were possible, it might not make us wiser. A life without fear can become arrogant. A civilization without awe can become destructive. A species that fears nothing may eventually destroy everything. The ancients may have been wrong about many explanations, but they were right about one thing: human beings need awe. We need to remember that we are not the center of all things. We need to feel the size of the ocean, the age of the stars, the power of death, the fragility of life, and the danger of our own pride. Sacred fear is not merely terror. It is the feeling of standing before something greater than yourself and realizing you are not in control. That feeling can be frightening, but it can also be the beginning of wisdom. So why did humans worship fear? Because fear was how they first encountered power. Because fear gave shape to the unknown. Because fear made invisible forces speakable. Because fear created rituals where chaos had once been shapeless. Because fear taught limits, humility, gratitude, and attention. And because deep down, humans understood that what we fear most often reveals what we value most. We fear death because life matters. We fear darkness because light matters. We fear chaos because order matters. We fear judgment because morality matters. We fear loss because love matters. The gods of fear were never only gods of terror. They were guardians of everything fragile. The storm god reminded us that shelter matters. The death god reminded us that time matters. The sea god reminded us that humility matters. The war god reminded us that peace matters. The plague god reminded us that the body matters. Perhaps humanity worshipped fear because fear was the shadow cast by everything sacred. And perhaps we still worship fear today, though we no longer call it worship. We build systems around it. We create politics from it. We sell products through it. We design technologies to escape it. We tell stories to survive it. Some ancient part of us still believes that if fear has a face, we can understand it. The names of the old gods may have faded, but fear remains. It waits in the hospital room, in the battlefield, in the storm warning, in the silence after bad news, in the dark ocean, in the empty sky, in the mirror when we realize we are not as powerful as we hoped. Maybe the question is not whether humans will ever stop fearing. Maybe the question is whether we can learn to fear without surrendering our souls to fear. Because fear can become a god. And when it does, it will always demand worship. Thank you for watching this journey into why humans worshipped fear and how ancient mythology transformed terror into gods, rituals, and meaning. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about dark mythology, ancient gods, forgotten fears, and the timeless forces that still shape humanity today.